Hi everyone, welcome. I'm out here in my yard, and what you see in front of us is my compost barrel, something that I make a lot of reference to in many of my videos, but I rarely show on video. And right next to it is the newest incarnation of my outdoor worm system, what I guess we're going to be calling Worm Bag version 5.0. 5.0 just really indicates that this is the 5th year I've been running an outdoor system. The original version 1 didn't even start out with a number. It just started out as an overwintering test, and it wasn't even in that bag. It was actually in that brown garbage pail that the bag sits within. And over time we graduated up to using the grow bag, and then the grow bag got infiltrated when it was resting on the ground, so it got moved up inside of this tub here. And this has been a pretty safe and secure location to keep this thing, to prevent any sort of curious creatures from trying to burrow in there and take advantage of the yummy worm feast that's in there. So we're going to be doing what we always do. We're going to be recruiting worms from the compost barrel, because the compost barrel is loaded with worms. So I've got some stuff to use for that purpose. I've got my glove on. I've got a laundry basket here with which I can remove a lot of that dry stuff on top, and that'll reveal the material down below that's got the worms in it. Then I've got a couple pots that we can take some donor material out with, and then I thought I might even go through that stuff a little bit to try to reduce the amount of stuff that is not yet broken down, to try to get that back into service in the compost barrel, to see if we can minimize that down to the point where it's mainly worms. So I'm going to be getting to work on this. Thought I'd bring the camera along to capture some of it, so let's get to work. So now over here in the compost barrel, it definitely did seem to me recently like this system was in need of some additional bedding, so I grabbed a bunch of leaves. But one thing I've been doing typically when I bump into one of these leaves off my holly bush, I exclude it, because I hate the idea of, you know, just haphazardly rummaging through the material and then bumping into one of those pointy, sticky needles, because that hurts. But I really didn't take a great deal of care when I was collecting up these leaves to throw them in here. It wouldn't be too surprising if we ran into one or two more of those holly bush leaves. I've got pretty much a regular supply of stuff coming into this system. Whenever there's materials coming out of the kitchen, which just don't seem like they're, you know, the sort of things that I would want to put aside and stick in the freezer and hang on to give to the worms down in the wormery, the stuff just ends up out here. And one of the things you're going to see right here on top is some homemade sauerkraut. This is some sort of like a slug or something. I don't know, whatever. I'm not too concerned about the sort of stuff that lives in here. Everyone's welcome. I mean, what am I going to do, right? Yeah, see? I can feel these darn holly leaves. So it's definitely a good idea to exclude them when I see them. Or feel them. In that case, I felt it before I saw it. So now here's like a chunk of pineapple. You know, pineapple's just something I've not had a lot of luck with down in the wormery, so I figured let's just go ahead and throw that right outside into the compost barrel. I'm already seeing a few worms that are hanging out over there on the leaves that we've been pulling out already, so we're starting to get down into the sections where we might start encountering some worms. And you know, the other stuff I'm going to just pull out here are, here's like some peels off of some beets, I believe, or maybe it's avocado shells, I forget. And that pile of sauerkraut, I think, can come out. What's right beneath that is a little care package. Some of the shredded paper that you see in here was run through my shredder when I was lubricating it. All I did was I oiled up the paper so that when it goes through the shredder, it can oil up the teeth, or the, you know, the cutting wheels, or whatever it's called down in there. And now we're starting to get into some of the stuff. This was like a chunk of the pumpkin that was really heavily rotted, so I didn't want to put that stuff away to feed downstairs. I figured anything that was so far gone I could simply throw in here. Because, you know, sometimes you gotta treat these little guys in this system to a yummy morsel too, instead of always saving the best stuff for the wormery worms. So I am bumping into some more pineapple here, I see some orange peel. Here's some more pieces of pumpkin. But I am starting to wonder, well, you know, I want to get some of these larger chunks out of our way first. So you can see these worms are definitely enjoying this little feast of pumpkin over here. It almost makes me wonder if it's time to start recruiting worms. I mean, I know they're not going to like being placed into this terribly dry container here. I wouldn't like it either if I was a worm, but, you know, might as well start, right? Got a good number of worms hanging out on this pumpkin over here. The pumpkin I'm going to pull out and, you know, return back into here. Not take it with the worms. It would be kind of nice if we could take only worms with us over into the worm bag, version 5.0. So here's some more large chunks pumpkin. Usually what we're pulling out of here though is just large handfuls of anything, you know, whatever comes up. Anything that looks like a handful that would have a lot of worms in it seems like fair game. So maybe that's really the approach we got to take here, rather than trying to be so selective and make sure that we're excluding anything that's not worms. So like right here we've got a nice pile of something that has a tremendous number of worms in it. It's kind of a nice haul right there. And I think if we keep going in this direction, we might end up with more of the same. Let's see what we got over here. Yep. Yeah, you got to admit, the compost barrel is a terrific place to go to recruit worms from. Okay. And it does seem like, you know, burrowing right down the middle, which is where I tend to put all the compostable materials. It seems like the right place to check. I don't really put anything around the edges, although I wouldn't be surprised to find worms around the edges too. I mean, I was kind of digging the idea of maybe pulling out only worms and leaving behind uncompostable materials, but that would take a while, I think, just sort of trying to let the worms burrow down and then scraping off materials that would be not worms off the top. That just might not be worth all that extra effort. It might just be best to bring along some of the material that the worms are inhabiting, because then, you know, I guess the other added benefit to that is that they get to have a little bit of familiar material to hang out in up until such a time that they feel comfortable wandering out into the freshly made contents of the worm bag. The worm bag I made with some shredded paper and cardboard mix that I bought up from downstairs, and then I just used some of my collection of leaves from the autumn leaf collection, and then I dampened the whole thing down drastically. I just kept dousing it with water until there was just water pouring out the bottom. And then the other thing that I did was I nested the grow bag inside of another grow bag. So like we always do, or at least like we've been doing for a while now, the grow bag is always nested within a second grow bag. But what I did this time was something similar to what we did a couple months ago, which was to put a liner, a plastic liner, in between the two grow bags to help the system hang on to its moisture content. So I don't know, maybe we do explore the outer edges a little bit, because maybe there's worms to be seen there too. Let's see. Yeah, it's not too bad. There's stuff out here too. A little bit of moisture. You can see here's some cardboard. It's kind of all piled together. It might not hurt if it were to be sort of torn apart a little bit here and there. Yeah. And I guess what I'm looking for is sort of little spots where there's larger amounts of worms than just the surrounding material. And it does seem like we're going to be bringing along some additional stuff. I mean, I might have been a little bit ambitious, because I did actually put 2 of these pots aside, thinking that I might actually go with loading up 2 of them. But I am starting to question whether we're going to want to go that much, if it's even necessary. It does seem like we've already managed to collect up a good number of worms here, just from the little bit of material that we've collected. I was even thinking, when it comes time to return all those leaves that we extracted, as well as some of those large pieces of pumpkin and stuff, it might be a good idea to try to bring some of this more worked material that's down low up to the surface and submerge some of that fresher, drier stuff. Some of the stuff, as you start to work your way down, is really kind of gooey and muddy and a little bit nasty. I mean, I had sort of a rough idea of how we might go about doing this, but I certainly couldn't predict exactly what we'd be in for once we actually started digging through here. I did sort of imagine possibly letting the stuff sit out here in the daylight, and then the worms would make their way down to a deeper level, permitting me to remove. Interesting. Remove some of the stuff that's not inhabited by worms. Man, look at all this crabgrass. You might remember in worm bag version 4.0 that we recently harvested, for the most part. I mean, I know we're still trying to migrate worms out of the material in that thing, but yeah, and we haven't even harvested the castings yet, so it might be premature to say that, but we did put a lot of crabgrass into that system, as we did in here too. But here it's just not really had a chance to work down quite as much as it did in the worm bag inside. Maybe there was just a whole lot more of it placed into here. Now, as I make my way down deeper, I start to question whether I'm going to see many more worms. I mean, we are dealing with composting worms that generally do the majority of their work near the surface. To have gone this deep down and still be finding worms is a little bit surprising. It's just interesting, some of these large chunks of bamboo. Kind of cool to see how it's coming along. You can even see worms have deposited a whole bunch of castings down inside of this stuff. And it just seems like the stuff is swollen up to become a much larger diameter than it was when I placed it in here, because I don't remember any of it being this thick. But it's certainly a lot more fragile than it was when I placed it in here. It breaks apart quite readily. I shouldn't break them all apart, because then the worms don't have those little cubby holes to cruise into, which is something they appear to like doing. Why mess up their fun little playground if you don't have to, right? It does almost seem like the system would benefit from some aeration. It almost seems like it would be nice if I could just empty the whole thing into something else, placing all the, you know, all the stuff that's not been worked down in first, and then on top of it some of the really heavily worked stuff. Man, look at this piece too. Huge. Definitely was not this big when I placed it in here. I don't think. I could just be misremembering though. Interesting. Every now and then I just go to this little patch of bamboo that's near my house and I pick some up to do little weird funny projects with. I had actually built my entire garden trellis system out of bamboo one year, but it wasn't sturdy at all, and then I switched over to building it out of regular lumber. You know, I'm starting to question whether we even need to go much further on this in terms of recruiting worms, because I got a feeling we've got ourselves a few hundred. And it is true that I built a pretty good sized environment for these worms to live in. So they'll have plenty of space to expand into, and if they sense that good amount of space to expand into, I think they'll do just that. They'll probably proceed to, you know, start mating and reproducing and creating a whole bunch of additional baby worms to help take advantage of all the extra space. It's only because I don't feel like I'm really encountering any other large spots of, you know, worm activity. We have been pretty thorough going through almost all of this stuff, and it just feels to me like as we go deeper and deeper, it seems less and less likely that we're going to encounter a pocket of many worms huddled together enjoying something. By the time anything has made it all the way down to this level that I'm at in here, pretty much all the best parts have been probably eaten already. And then, you know, we've just got some exploring type worms hanging out in it down low. Just be interesting if we suddenly encountered a pocket of many worms right after saying we're unlikely to do so. Yeah, you know, I am starting to get that feeling like maybe we've done a pretty good job here recruiting a sufficient number of worms to get worm bag version 5.0 off the ground. It just feels to me somehow like we're not going to have a very, you know, a very heavily populated worm bag, at least not in the beginning. I mean, like I've done in the past, we could always come back into here, into the compost barrel to recruit more worms. Perhaps after we've given everything a little bit of a opportunity to settle down again. You know, maybe I'll take all those pumpkin bits and locate them all right in the middle so that all the worms come back to the middle to take advantage of that yummy food. And the middle is where I'm going to be continuing to feed anyway, or at least I don't really treat this as feeding, I just treat this as composting. But it just seems to me like we could have maybe done a little bit better. But let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's treat this as a great stash of worms. Why don't we use these to launch off Worm Bag 5.0, and then we'll just really quickly rebuild what's going on here with all of these yummy morsels of pumpkin that we pulled out, pieces of nice moldy pineapple, a little stash of cabbage, sauerkraut in this case, even some bits of beets as well as paper towel surrounding it. I just figured I'd try to collect up all these yummy morsels, get them all in the same spot for the most part, right here in the middle. And if we were to come back in here at some point in the near future to try to collect up some more worms to help us expand our population in the worm bag, then it's a pretty good likelihood that we'll find them right there. Very nice. What else do we have here? I guess we've still got this little collection of shredded paper. I just wrapped it into a piece of newspaper to carry it up from the basement so I don't end up with shreds of paper throughout my house. Just figured I'd tear that up a little bit as well, and now I think we can restore the top layer of leaves to this thing. So, for those of you that might not have even ever seen my compost barrel, there it is. And now we can make our way over to the newly built, or newly rebuilt, Worm Bag version 5.0. So, what I did this time was I went really big on filling this thing up with lots and lots of leaves and paper. And while I was collecting up the leaves that I put in here, I also bought my screen out so that I collected up a whole bunch of this really fine stuff. This is the stuff that goes through my screen and that I have a bunch of now downstairs. This is what I mix into my prepared bedding. I figured it might look kind of neat having some of that spread out here on the top to give the whole thing a nice sort of fine appearance. I mean, if we were to dig down a little bit, we would encounter sections that also have shredded paper and cardboard in it. But I thought it'd be kind of nice if we had a top layer of just, you know, just leaves here. But yeah, like I said, the plastic bag, you can see right there in between the two layers, between the two fabric grow bags. And it's a really large bag. It's a bag that came with a chest freezer that I recently commissioned in my garage. And it even had these nice holes in it, even though I did punch a few additional holes in it too, so it's not just a, you know, completely airtight bag liner. It's got some holes in it here and there too, but I think it'll help a lot if we ever decide to take this thing back inside to, you know, help it hang on to its moisture content. So, okay, enough of this chit-chat. Let's get down to business. Let's let these worms loose and see how many we ended up with. Like always, I'm always looking to hear people's input. in the comments of how many worms you think we released here. So we had a chance to see how many worms we had in the process of collecting them. Now we'll have an additional little chance to check them out in the release. So I'll do my best to see what I can do about, you know, spreading things out a little bit, giving us a slightly better glimpse at what we're really dealing with here. And then at some point, after they've kind of slithered out of view, we'll just go ahead and we'll cover up so that they're not getting bombarded with all this nasty daylight and that they can take cover. All right, I'll try to fish a few more out of this thing and get them in there too. Well, you know, it sort of occurred to me after the fact that if we really wanted to try to exclude some of the material in here that we think would be better off going back into the compost barrel for further breakdown, further processing in the barrel, we could always come back in here at a later time once the worms have kind of become comfortable with diving down into the lower reaches of the system, and once they abandon these upper levels of material. In case we don't like it. I mean, this is a brand new system and it's going to be around for a while, so I don't think there's going to be a problem with any of this material eventually breaking down, because you can even see some of the crabgrass that made its way in here. Crabgrass just seems to take a long time, but you know what, I shouldn't really spread this stuff out too much, just in case the worms are more comfortable remaining in it for a little while longer before they venture out down into the leaves and cardboard and paper below. So let's leave them with some of this familiar material to hang out in up until such a time that they decide on their own to leave. So that's it. Please don't forget to leave me your comments. Let me know how many worms you think we started this system with. I really do look forward to seeing what everyone says, and then I'll take my guess, combine it with your guesses, come up with some sort of an average number, and that'll be the official worm count for this system. And at some point we might change that. We might add more worms too, but other than that, I think we're done here. So let me get things covered back up. Get this piece of cardboard on here. Get our traditional custom-made plywood decorative covering on here. And we're done. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.